last week, you'll remember, we were looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and we read verse 1, 2, and we kind of hung in there at verse 3 for a little while. And verse 3 said, "Now I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ." Remember? "And the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God." Very controversial kind of passage this is. To others, not to me. It creates problems for people. But if you can see something there, that there are three bodies relating to three heads. Remember? I said, the head of every man is Christ, the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Three bodies, three heads. So there's a formula there. There's a formula. Three heads, three bodies. This means that the way that you speak about the relationship between one body and its head must be consistent with how you speak about each body and its head. And so think about that in relation to how Christ relates to his head, who is God. God doesn't lord it over Jesus. God is not the boss of Jesus. Yeah. God doesn't go around big-noting himself and trying to put Jesus in his place. That's not how the Trinity works. And so how Jesus and God relate is consistent throughout each of the modes or each aspect of the formula. It's consistent with how the church relates with Jesus. And it's consistent with how the wife or the woman relates to the man. There's a consistency there. So don't go taking this passage and trying to make it something in which there is some kind of male supremacy, in which men get to tell their wives what to do and what not to do, that men get to write the checks and to handle all the money. It's not talking about that. As I said last week, it's speaking about cosmic reality. Now, things are about to get hairy. Yes. Not too long ago, it was fashionable for both men and women to wear hats. Nowadays, the closest thing that we have towards anything like that really is, it's boys and bald men wearing baseball caps. It's about the closest that we get. But a little while ago, it was very fashionable for men and women to wear hats wherever they went. Then things operated differently, though, between the sexes, because there were times where men would, by protocol, it was proper protocol for at certain times, in certain situations, for the man to remove his hat. A man would remove his hat when he came into a house. A man would remove his hat when he was in front of a dignitary. A man would remove his hat whenever a lady walked into the room. A gentleman would stand and take his hat off and say, "Well, howdy, ma'am." There were different rules for men to ladies, because the ladies never had to take their hat off. Different rules that operate with women than what operate with men. That's very important, Because when we're looking at this passage, it's talking about the different rules that operate between men and women. It's not talking about salvation. It's not talking about your relationship with Jesus. In Christ, there is neither male nor female, neither slave nor free. But biologically, and hence on account of biological differences or gender differences, that plays out in society with different operations, or, as I say it quite simply, there are different rules for men than there are for women. There are different rules for boys than there are for girls. Here's a rule that operates differently for men and for women. During war, the men go out to fight, and the women stay home and protect the children and raise the children. You may not like that rule. You may say, I want to go out to fight. If you break that rule, civilization will ground to a halt. That rule is a very important rule. And it is part of society and become part of history, really, on account of the fact that it's very important that we get through this war, and at the end of it, that there are ladies and their children to be able to continue the next generation. Yes. So you see, these differences are they're important. So there are rules that apply to men and rules that apply to ladies. Of course, there's one man who never had to take his hat off. I wonder if anybody knows which man that is. The king. Yes. Why wouldn't the king have to take his hat off? Actually, it also applies in ecclesiastical circles to bishops, and in legal circles, it applies to judges. Oh, each with their different areas of authority. Yes. Quite clearly, the reason why the king didn't take off his hat is because he is a representation of cosmic reality, of how God has made the universe, of authority. And that's why priests wouldn't take their hats off, and the Pope wouldn't take his hat off. And that's why judges don't take their hats off, because they are representative of the authority that God has in the universe, cosmic reality, or the pattern, or the hierarchy that God has set up, or let's just call it what it's called in the Bible, the kingdom of God. This thing works out throughout all of the world. Okay, I'm just sticking to my notes so that I can say what I need to say nice and quick. Yes, all right. Yes, of course, in the postmodern world, they want to get rid of all the rules because they don't like there being different rules between men and women. How are we going here? I see some people are starting to get a little cool. You're okay? Are you okay? Because you're getting cool. You okay? No, you're okay. All right, we're okay. Okay, we're all okay. All right, so they don't want boys playing rough and tumble. They want boys to play nice, like girls. They do. They do. They want boys to play with dolls because, we're getting rid of all the rules. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with this woke agenda, this equality agenda. Big problem. I don't know if you watched the attempted assassination of Trump last week, but they have this thing in the Secret Service where they're trying to have equality of representation, where you have an equal number of women as men in the Secret Service, and so they they sent out the Secret Service to protect Trump, and some of them were women. And so when this gun started firing off, one of the women who was there to protect Trump was ducking and hiding behind him while other men were jumping on top of him. And then one of the women, and good on her, she was right up there in front of him, but she got to about here on Trump. She was only tall enough. She couldn't protect all of the kill zone because she wasn't tall enough. And then as the Secret Service were carrying Trump off the stage, well, they weren't carrying him. He's a big guy, over 200 pounds. As they were guiding him off the stage, his hat fell off, and the girl agent bent down and picked the hat up, exposing more of Trump's body for some shooter out there to shoot. And fair enough, he did need his hat being picked up, but no man would have thought of picking his hat up. But of course, a mum would think, oh, you need your hat, sonny. So this whole trying to break the rules, trying so that there's no rules, that what applies to one applies exactly to another, that gets us into all kinds of trouble. Oh, okay. All right, here we go. I'm just going to quickly go through this from verse 4 to 16. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. So if I was to come in here, in that culture, and cover my head, people would go, what's going on? So not too long ago, when men as well as women wore hats, men would come into church and take their hat off, but no woman would take her hat off, because there's different rules, you see. Yeah, there's different rules. Verse 5. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors. Now the Greek word there is kadeskune. It means this. Listen to these words. It means humiliates or disgraces or puts to shame or creates utter confusion. If she prays or prophesies with her head uncovered. So don't say women can't talk in church, because if they pray or prophesy, you're going to hear that, But if she prays or prophesies with her head uncovered, then she brings shame or disgrace or humiliates or creates confusion. With her head, she dishonors her head. Okay, now, who's the woman's head? We just read that the man is the head of the woman. Okay, so it's saying something is going on that creates confusion regarding her and how she relates to her husband. Okay, so single ladies, you're off the hook. But ladies that have a husband, there's something going on that creates a problem of appearance in regards to you and how you relate to your husband. So if I were to say to you, Jenny, I don't know if we've got any Jennies here, but I hope just Jenny, I'm not choosing any particular Jenny, but if I were to say to you, Jenny, she really let her hair down. Hello. I might just be saying Jenny's having a good time. However, the implication is some moral lapse is involved. There is a moral element attached to saying Jenny really let her hair down. Yeah. So you remember the scandal that Mary created in Bethany on the night when they were in Simon the leper's house. And she let her hair down to dry Jesus' feet. And the accusation from Simon the leper was that she was a prostitute. Yeah, because if you didn't wear a head covering in those days and you let your hair down, that's what you were telling everybody. So say if you've got a husband and you bring him to church with you, but then you start acting as though you're available. You start, maybe you took some drugs and didn't realize you took them, but you started behaving like a hussy. And you started behaving a little bit like a hussy. And letting all the other men in town know that you're available. Now, what that's going to do two things. Firstly, it's going to be saying something about you, but it's going to create confusion. All right, remember this word, kere skune. This word, part of its meaning is that it creates confusion. It's going to create a confusion in how people perceive your relationship with your husband. You're saying, well, what about you men? Are you men going to get away with it? Well, of course, no, because this is a rule that would apply to men as well, except that not the head covering part. But if I were to come in here with my shirt undone down to here and a couple of gold chains around me and a fake tattoo, and I started with my big hairy chest and started to all the ladies, making myself very attractive to all the ladies, then it's going to create confusion, especially if I'm a pastor. I've had to deal with churches whose pastors have used the church as the women in their church like a harem. The confusion that spreads throughout the church, the confusion that it creates. Yes. So in Corinthian culture, to remove all doubt about her marital status, a woman would wear a head covering. Now, we don't wear head coverings today. Christine is an exception that proves the rule. But we that's not a common thing that we do nowadays. But in Corinthian culture, if you wanted to let everybody around know that I'm attached, don't come bothering me. Today we might have a ring on our fingers, but there are more subtle ways. Any man or any woman in a marital relationship is not going to come into church and sweep the room searching for possible courtesans. And that's what I do when sorry, hold on. Sorry, that's not what I all right. This is when somebody's meant to yell out, "Help him, Jesus!" So, as a pastor, when new people come to church, I watch their eyes. Now, we've had certain men who have come, and I've watched their eyes, and I can see that they are players. Yeah, they are players. And I keep my eye on them. And we at times have had to have a little word to one or two, and then they don't come back. Yeah, because I can spot the players, because they're looking. Is there anybody who I can impress? Yeah. All right. It is the same as having her head shaved. Okay, talking about the woman if she's what was the word? Dishonoring her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it's a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. So don't think that it's mere appearance that Paul is talking about. Don't think it's just that it would be embarrassing for you to have your head shaved because, you'd be bald. Don't think that it's on account of that Paul is just talking about that. But in the culture back then, the temples, in their pagan worship, in their idolatry, we've talked a little bit about that, but they would end up having hedonistic, ritualistic, orgiastic ceremonies. That's as graphic as I'm allowed to get. But you know what I'm talking about. And they believe that long flowing hair on a woman or a man, that's an important thing that I just threw in there, on a woman or a man, that was a sign of availability and fertility. Yes. And so, say you didn't want to be involving yourself in that way, what you could do was you could shave your head, and that would give off the impression that you were not available and you were not fertile. And they said that would be a shame for them to do that kind of thing, because we talked about this, it would intrude on the koinonia of the community, of the society, because it was during those practices that people would find themselves in community. All right? Okay, I can't go into any more than that. That's the limit of my ability to be able to speak publicly about that kind of thing. So a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God, but woman is the glory of man. I love this. I love this because I hold Sasha up before you, and you all know what this means. The woman is the glory of man. You all know that I punched above my weight when I landed Sasha in my life. You all know that I did better than what a man like me should have been able to do. And so yes, Sasha is the representation of my glory. Woman is the glory of man. The woman is the glory of, it says in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 4, a virtuous woman is a crown to her husband. Yeah. So the woman crowns her husband in three ways. First of all, she's a mirror. She's a feedback loop. She lets her husband know if he's doing the right thing or the wrong thing. She lets her husband know if he looks right or if he doesn't look right. Sasha is constantly saying, "You're not going to the shops wearing that, are you?" You see, so she makes me lift myself into a better state. Yeah. Sharon often looks at Greg, and just the look on her face lets Greg know that he has to stop whatever it is that he's doing. He's going too far again. Yeah. So firstly, she's a mirror, a feedback loop of knowledge. Secondly, she demands from her husband the best that is in him. Yes. Thirdly, because the woman is beauty, represents beauty. Men are not beautiful. Men are functional, practical. Men actually, in the whole scheme of things, represent wisdom, and the feminine represents beauty. Yes. I don't have time to tell you today. I'm going to leave it to the next time I speak, but I've got a great story that's going to be talking about the beauty and how necessary that is to lift us up from the darkness of the world and into a better place in God. Okay. For man did not, verse 8, for man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. So from man and for man, but this is only half of the equation. There's more coming. Okay? It is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority, or, here's another word, or power, authority or power, over her own head, and because of the angels. By mentioning angels, Paul is obviously talking about the hierarchy here, but I just want to simplify it down to this and say that our worship is celestial. That when we worship, there are angels worshiping with us. When we worship this morning, angels were worshiping with us. Sometimes we can hear them. Sometimes they make themselves known. There have been occasions where they have played musical instruments, where there is nobody on the stage but the instruments start playing. Angels participate in our worship. Nevertheless, verse 11. Okay, now we're going to be given the second half of the equation. So woman from man and for man. Now here comes the second part of the equation. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of the woman. For as women came from man, so also man is born of woman. But everything comes from God. So what this is talking about is our interdependence. Man needs woman, woman needs man. It's actually, when it says that phrase, in the Lord, it's taking us back to our pre-binary, that's when God took woman from Adam's side, made Eve. So back to when woman was part of the original man. And so it's taking us back to that, in the Lord, neither male nor female, in the Lord. And so it's taking us back to that. That's why when a man marries a woman, they become one. No longer two, but one. All right. Judge for yourselves, verse 13. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? So the idea that the Greek infers here is of a kind of a woman stepping out of line, kind of leaping over her husband, dismissing the angels, and then coming brazenly before God without honoring or acknowledging the way that God has set up reality. Taking a brazen posture before God. Verse 14. Does not the very nature of things teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace to him? So, I know that today there are men with long hair, but back then, when a man had long hair, it meant that he was including himself as part of the temple class of prostitutes. That's why it's a disgrace. Okay? They would grow their hair long as a sign of attraction. I used to have long hair. It was about down to here. But that if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for long hair is given to her as a covering. All right. So, this is what is interesting. This is the third context in which the word covering is mentioned. The first is to do with man is her covering. The second is to do with a head covering that is her covering, and now it's talking about hair being her covering. So what is it? We got three coverings. What is going on here? What do you do? What do you do with that? Well, let me tell you that all three mean something. The first is to do with how God has constructed the world, that he is at the top, and then came man, made in the image of God, and then out of man came woman, and then come children, and then come the animals, and then come the vegetables, and then come the minerals. So this cosmic structure that God has set up, the first is relating to that. The second relates to virtue or to chastity. The third is a reflection on beauty, that the woman has long hair as her covering and as her glory, as her part of that which makes her beautiful. And together, all of those three, they become a template for femininity or for pure womanhood. Okay, so what this means is that for a woman to be all that a woman can be, then there is knowing your place in the world, knowing your place in God. Secondly, it's being a virtuous woman, a woman who knows her boundaries, who knows what's right, who endeavors to stand straight and tall as she walks through the earth. Yes. To walk through the earth straight and tall. That's why you would go to finishing school and put books on your head and endeavor to walk without the books falling off. Well, I'm not a woman, so yes, not to walk sassy, not to walk sassy, saying to all the men, take a look at my booty, not being bootylicious. Yeah, oh, you're not allowed to talk like that. What are you doing talking like that? Walking with virtue in your life. Come on, let's get real. Talking with virtue in your life. Yeah. And thirdly, just being a woman is a thing of beauty. Not that a woman is a thing, but you know what I mean. The feminine is the beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing in the earth. Yes. So don't take what Paul is talking about as some kind of eternal fashion directive. I remember when I first bumped into some Plymouth brethren, and they were dressed very conservatively, and they were beautiful Christian people, and I really enjoyed my time with them. But the women wore headscarves and were acting very conservatively, and it was quite sectarian. And it's not talking about that. It's not talking about an eternal fashion directive so that when you get to heaven, everybody's going to be having to wear headscarves and things like that. And verse 16, I think, proves that it's like that, because if this passage finishes off with, if anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. It's talking about their practice that they had during those days. So that's all that I have time for. I've got a lot more to say about hair, because this is very hairy. Yeah, this passage. There's a lot more things. I'm going to talk with you about angels. I'm going to talk with you about all kinds of things out of this passage. So we look forward to that.